After a solid week of plowing through 7 to 8 page final projects and all those final exams and trying to make sense of some of the worst examples of writing I've ever seen and dealing with the cheating and all that other crap that makes me question my sanity for having pursued a career in academia and trying to keep my thirsty soul alive by furtively, guiltily stealing a few stray minutes here and there to do a little work on the Mahler Ninth, I'm in kind of a rare mood, and on account of the generosity of a universe that has absolutely none and a stroke of luck that I certainly do not deserve, I was given a great gift to distract me for a little while, and I must share it with you. A couple of years ago, I got the weird idea of posting some weekly Sunday school lessons taught by an atheist who knows the biblical territory pretty well. I spent a mostly amusing and entertaining year at that project, and when I felt I'd accomplished anything I'd set out to accomplish, I walked away from that project leaving an archive of amusing artifacts, scripture readings and commentary, poetry readings, challenges to creationists, and so on. In the process, I dealt with a couple of gospel tracts by Jack T. Chick, his flagship opus, This Was Your Life, and the most widely circulated anti-evolution tract in the history of human stupidity, Big Daddy with a question mark. A few days ago, the latter was discovered and commented on by a YouTube troll. I know how the discovery was made, but that's not relevant or even interesting. The troll account is identified as Beetle Bayley, first name spelled like the insect, surname spelled with 2 Y's. That account was opened in March 2015, but has no content whatsoever. In other words, it's a troll account established for the sole purpose of drive-by posting on other YouTube channels. So what I discovered in the comments on my Big Daddy video was the following from said Beetle Bayley. How come more than 90% of all rock layers on the planet are water sediment? How did the Cretaceous layer form? It's universal, across all continents, and could only have formed in water, ... question mark. Just in case the import of these questions is unclear, you should know that they are verbatim talking points from creationist snake oil salesman Kent Hovind, who identifies himself as Dr. Dino and his odious little sidekick Matt Powell as Professor Powell. The bit about the water sediment is a reference to the flood of Noah, as is mention of a supposedly universal Cretaceous layer, Cretaceous uncapitalized, but when you're in the army of God, such niceties as spelling and grammar and accuracy just aren't all that important. There are evolutionists to whack. My response took 2 parts. Here's part 1. Are these good faith questions from someone seeking answers to interesting puzzles? Or are these gotcha rhetorical jabs from a creationist who thinks that people who study these things for a living don't know the answers to them? I suspect I know which of those possibilities your query represents, but despite what I suspect, I'll treat these questions as good faith inquiries. I'm not sure about your stats, but I don't doubt that 90% of rocks exposed at the surface of continents are sedimentary. Given the nature and history of this planet, it would be amazing if that weren't the case. If you sink a drill into the sedimentary cover anywhere on any continent and drill deep enough, you'll eventually hit what that sedimentary cover is resting on. That deeper rock, known as basement rock, most of it igneous in origin and a lot of it metamorphosed under the extreme heat and pressure at such depth, as well as the compressional forces of colliding continents, is covered by later rock that's sedimentary in origin. If you understand how a planet accretes in the first place, then it'll be obvious to you that at least early in its history, all of the rock of any new planet is going to be igneous, for the simple reason that as the accretion occurs, the heat generated by impacting bolides is going to keep the whole thing molten until it has a chance to cool. That will take time, lots and lots of time. An impatient God could not build a planet like this in a week. What happens then? Depends on the constitution of the atmosphere. If the atmosphere includes a great deal of water vapor, H2O being one of the most common compounds in the universe and therefore not at all rare, and if that planet can cool sufficiently, that water vapor is going to condense and fall as rain and accumulate in the lowest places. That's the origin of oceans. Oceans fed by rivers. Rivers eroding the surface rock, turning it into sediments which accumulate in depositional basins, such as along the margins of continents. Et voila, sedimentary rock. If you're with me so far, then it's time to consider what happens when that cooling planet's crust, still driven by the dynamism of heat continuously generated by radioactive decay of mantle and crustal rock, breaks into plates that are driven around by convection currents in the mantle. You can see the same principle at work if you boil a pan of water on a stove. Watch the convection cells. Now, imagine such convection cells operating on vast scales in the mantle of a dynamic Earth. That's going to move the surface plates around quite a bit. Continents are going to collide, and when they do, that sedimentary rock that's been forming at the continental margins is going to be folded, faulted, uplifted, and raised to mountainous heights. And the rains come down and the ice forms at altitude, and the whole thing is sliced, diced, sculpted, weathered, and eroded, with all that material flowing into the oceans to form new sedimentary rock, which will in turn at some far future date be lifted to a mountainous state by other continental collisions. We interrupt this account to ask, are you still with me? Are you trying to imagine this process? You don't have to hear it from me, a musician. It would be better if you learned it from geologists, like I did. But for that to happen, you have to have a certain respect for objectivity, for scientific rigor, and, let's face it, truth. Anyway, resting there above this sentence is an account of the presence of sedimentary rock all over the planet. If you haven't understood it, or if you've just casually dismissed it after such effort has been made on your behalf, then there's little point in my going on. But, assuming you're asking in good faith, I'll continue with an account of that Cretaceous layer in a follow-up post. And here's part 2. Now, about that Cretaceous layer, you say it's universal, I say that's bullshit. There are no Cretaceous rocks where I live. The cover around here is all Permian. When I taught at the University of Arkansas, I was walking around on rocks from the Pennsylvanian period, not the Cretaceous. There never were any Cretaceous rocks there. When I was teaching at Drury University, I was living in a house built on soils weathered from Mississippian period rocks. When I was sojourning in the Appalachians, I was walking around on rocks that aren't even sedimentary in origin. So if you've been led to think that there's Cretaceous period rock all over the place, you've been misled. There are, however, Cretaceous deposits 100 miles south of me, lots and lots of them, extending all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. You know why? Because the middle of the North American continent was covered in water during the Cretaceous period. Why? A couple of things. First, the continents are not permanent, and neither are their elevations above mean sea level. Second, the mean atmospheric temperature during the Cretaceous was quite a bit higher than it is now. That means there was no ice on the planet, not even at high elevations. In other words, no glaciers. That means that all the water on Earth was either in the atmosphere or in lakes and rivers or in oceans. That means that sea level was a lot higher at that time than it is now. If you put those things together, you can easily enough understand why there would be a lot of Cretaceous rock in the middle of the North American continent. If sea level were as high right now as it was during the Cretaceous, Oklahoma City would be a seaport. And there are indeed plenty of Cretaceous deposits around the planet, just as there are plenty of Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, Mississippian, Pennsylvanian, Permian, Triassic, Jurassic, Tertiary, and Quaternary deposits all over the Earth. Has someone misled you into thinking that there's a single unified rock layer of some type all over the Earth? Some creationist snake oil salesman who believes a great flood created all that sedimentary rock in a single year? Tell that to a geologist and you'll be laughed out of town. I'll close this probably wasted account with some advice. Don't try to learn science from a charlatan like Kent Hovind. If you're interested in science, get busy and learn it for real. Learn it from the people who know. In other words, scientists. Don't go asking laymen like me to explain stuff to you. Don't listen to lying scumbags and perpetuate their lies in turn. Truth is precious. Life is short. Too short for bullshit. It appears I guessed correctly. Not that it would have taken divine revelation or even keen intelligence to figure it out. Beetle Bayley's comment disappeared, along with those replies that I took a great deal of time and effort to craft in such a way that they could be understood by almost anyone. I suspect Reverend Bayley never even bothered to read them. On to the next educated child of Satan. Life is a great wonder, brothers and sisters, and a continuous fascination. I'll have a Mahler 9th video out before too long. Das Lied von der Erde took 6 non-stop weeks, but the 9th is yielding much more readily to the analytical scalpel, as I knew it would. Happy holidays. You too, Beetle Bayley, you poor misguided soul, wherever you may be and whatever you celebrate. I would happily celebrate your awakening were it to happen.